Hello, everyone. I'm extremely happy to be here. And today I will be talking about the material locus in the space of reason on the example of Marx's conception of subsumption of labor under capital. It doesn't work again.
You keep talking.
Okay. So there is a twofold route. Oh, thank you. There is a twofold route for this talk. First is that when I was working on my PhD, which was about Marxist reading of Hilary Putnam's idea of division of linguistic labor, I had this initial idea to give a description of some conceptual tools, such as meanings, are produced in the materiality of social practices. And then I found out that I'm not really sure what the materiality of the social practices is in some philosophically interesting terms. And also during the time of my working on the PhD, I started to work in a grant project, Locality of Reason, which has the goal to think of the reason and the rationality not in terms of some imposed universal set of rules, but in terms of something that emerges from the bottom, from different kinds of localities. And I thought, okay, I was thinking about meanings in terms of material practices, maybe thinking about reasons in terms of their relation to material practices will be somehow helpful. And that's how I found an unobvious friend and helper in this endeavor, although not personal friend, Robert Brandom. But then there's another problem, because when you find about the Pittsburgh school and start to get into it from the perspective of Robert Brandom, it turns out to be quite an idealistic school of thought. And then the problem arises how to combine the Marxist materialism with apparent idealism of normative pragmatics and inferentialism of Brandom. And I think this problem is somehow applicable to the whole of the Pittsburgh school, but probably McDowell and Sellars are much easier to be excluded from the idealist camp than it is the case with Brandom. So when I speak about Pittsburgh school in this talk, I basically mean Brandom. And I took the liberty to use the quote from Marx as a motto for this talk. It's not very telling by itself, but it appears in the passage about the commodity fetishism, and it has a particularly externalist ring to me. And I think that finding out about a philosophically interesting concept of materialism in Marx has something to do with grasping of this externalist vibe that transpires through that quote. So here is the plan for my talk. I will talk about materialism and idealism for a little bit, then about formal and real subsumption of labor under capital, and then I will try to present this area of subsumption as a material locus in the space of reason. So when we talk about Marxist materialism, what do we mean? Most often and typically we ascribe historical materialism to Marx, which I find not so interesting philosophically, especially as a as a historiosophical claim about the iron laws of history, which is driven by the development of the productive forces. And I also have a problem with like sources for this theory, because our main source is Communist Manifesto, which is basically like a piece of propaganda. It's a good text, it's a good reading, but it's not primarily the philosophical statement, but a political statement. And things are much more complicated, for instance, in early Marxist writings on ideology and philosophical economical manuscripts. But I think that this historical materialism in Marx, if it is there, it presupposes some kind of anthropological materialism, which Marx expresses where he says that human being, in order to be conscious, first has to be alive. And in this emphasis on the creating their own lives by humans as something that distinguishes them among other animals rather than reason, for instance, I would seek the root of this anthropological materialism. And also I think we can find there kind of a socio-ontological materialism, which rather than posing some factual historiosophical thesis about the rules, the laws of history, should I?
See what's in the chat.
Okay. One new message? Okay. I don't see anything. So, oh, here it is. Socio-ontological materialism. That would be a thesis about sort of an order of explanation in which explaining some sort of ground level phenomena of generally speaking economic practices has the primacy over explaining some other like cultural or even epistemological phenomena. But already here I think this materialism should be qualified somehow and sort of treated as a metonymic materialism, where some aspect which is being material transformation of the world around us, of labor process, is metonymically giving the name for the whole practice, although it may and probably do and should include also other important factors. The device doesn't work again.
Click on that screen. Just click.
Oh yeah, now I know what's the problem. Okay. And when it comes to Pittsburgh School and its idealism, and especially in Brandom, I think it can be stressed by the three factors. The inferentialism, so the claim that what the contents of our claims or beliefs depend are other claims and beliefs. So we don't have this material external grounding for them necessarily. The conceptualism about the nature of social interactions, which are expressed in form of some rules, and that those rules are normative rather than factual. So there are rules of the deontological character. And here I quote Sellars, to which Brandom also of course refers, with the comment that Sellars probably can be saved quite easily from the from being considered idealist, and Brandom about this rational giving and asking for reasons criteria that distinguishes us from other animals, which I think also places Brandom as a sort of an anthropological idealist, as well probably as a socio-ontological one as well. And one interesting thing about Brandom and Marx is the way that Brandom himself speaks about Marx. For instance, in his lecture on reason and genealogy and the hermeneutics of magnanimity. I never know how to pronounce this complicated word. So, in this lecture, Brandom dubs Marx alongside with Freud and Nietzsche of the great unmaskers of 19th century, and what characterizes great unmaskers is that they unmask what seems to be a reason as something that is actually causally explained by, in case of Marx, by relations of production. And it's a very simple picture. At first glance, it's in accordance with Marx's theory. And if this would be the case, if Marx would be unmasker and genealogist in this sense, then it would be particularly hard to find a version of Marxist materialism that would be also of some importance for any theory of intentionality, especially for a kind of theory of intentionality that Brandom proposed. And it's not like Brandom is especially hostile towards Marx. He noticed that that the genealogical approach of Marx has some limits, and it can also be fruitful as a critical inquiry, but I think presented as such, although Brandom doesn't provide us with a very extensive reading of Marx, Marxist philosophy or sociology could at best be complementary to the endeavor that Brandom undertakes himself. Could you click on the... Oh, thank you. But then we can also see Marx as a deontologist rather than genealogist and unmasker, although he's still an unmasker in his deontology. Here's the famous fragment that has already been quoted here about the differences between the here it's a spider and the worker pursuing his goal of performing a certain kind of labor. And what is easy to pay attention to here is the fragment where Marx points to the imagination as a factor of labor process of a worker. But to me, the most interesting part is the very last sentence of this fragment. He not only effects a change of form in the material on which he works, but he also realizes a purpose of his own that gives the law to his modus operandi, and to which he must subordinate his will. And in a sense, it's a very Kantian picture. So we have some agent who, in order to, of course, we would talk about hypothetical rather than categorical imperative here. Yeah, but it's not an agent who operates under the law of nature, which cannot be broken because it's grounded in for instance, physicalist terms, but under the law that subordinates the will. So it has a form of a certain kind of normativity, which is built in the production process and drives this process along. So here's the most scientific part of my presentation, a diagram. We could present Marxist materialism as a form of a relation where from the bottom of the forces of production emerges the space of reasons. There is an analogy to the base superstructure relation of which I don't like to talk. And then if we understand the forces of productions as mere causes, we can speak of Marx as a genealogist in Brandomian sense. But if we find an aspect of normative rationality within the forces of productions themselves, then we can speak of Marxist materialism as something that let us find the material locus of the space of reason. And I am inclined to say that probably the easier way to find this this understanding of normative character of the production process is in Marx's conception of subsumption of labor under capital. This is the conception that Marx presented in unpublished chapter of Capital, results of the direct production process. And now it is very popular among post-operaismo theorists of Marx, but their focus is directed first and foremost to the real subsumption of labor under capital. So to the part where capital serves as the rule for the actual process of how the labor is conducted, that later can be, according to these theorists, is in fact extended to the whole social life in the latest stages of capitalism. But I am more concerned with the formal subsumption of labor under capital, of which Marx speaks in this quote. And the formal subsumption of labor under capital is an interesting thing, because it's, as Marx points out in a couple of different places, it doesn't change the very physical activity in its arrangement that happens in the factory. It doesn't even happen in the factory yet. It happens in the manufacture. Of course, it changes something. So we cannot tell the analytical philosophical story of the world where the physical factors are all the same, because, for instance, someone is actually physically taking money to their hands as a paid worker, rather than, for instance, being a slave who is not paid. But what is sort of important from the logic of exploitation of labor, so the whole arrangement of use of the machine and certain tools, for instance, doesn't appear here yet. What appears is a different institutional arrangement. So, for instance, worker and the boss face themselves as in the relation of pure monetary exchange, rather than as a master craftsman and a crafter. And later, we can see that this consists mainly in the sort of a mystified ascription of social meanings to agents and their activities. So, so the boss now represents the capital, the worker now represents the labor, and the mystification of capital that lies in this subsumption is that, as we can see here, labor is now perceived as capital's own process. And productivity of labor is seen as a productivity of capital. Interesting thing about formal subsumption of labor under capital is that it sort of causally affects the very material process of production. So it results in the real subsumption of labor under capital, which has very different, many different aspects to it, including scale, use of the machine, also application of sciences to the process of production. Yeah, but all those changes result from previous formal subsumption of labor under capital, and what is important, formal subsumption of capital doesn't go away. It stays with us. So we still have this situation where throughout all this factual, material, causal changes, the specific social meanings are preserved as also as being at work in this process. And in this process, we face the situation where we can speak of a relation between worker and their labor, which is somewhat similar to what we already know from the alienation conception in Marx. But here are two quotes where Marx describes this process, this relation within formal and within real subsumption of labor under capital. And what is important for me is, first of all, is that labor here confronts worker, which has an interesting ambiguity for me, because first of all, it's an opposite to the worker, but also it's it's something that becomes objectified as an object of some kind of perception. This kind of perception is what I'd like to discuss a little bit in a while, but also the word notionally that Marx uses here to refer back to formal subsumption is interesting for me, because this is clearly indication that what we are dealing here with is not just a mere empirical sensory perception, but something that has already conceptual component to it. From this, leaving for a while the two confrontations of the work and their labor on the screen, we can jump to the last section of this talk, which is about subsumption as a material locus on the in the space of reasons. I'd like to think about what kind of relation we can actually speak of in this situation. And I think that it's easier to think about it as a specific epistemic fact and a practical act at the same time. When we think about epistemic fact that is present in this appearance of the labor of the worker as something alien to the worker themselves, I think we could have three options to interpret it. Is it merely a sensory experience? I think it's hard to sensory experience in a single fact of experiencing something like my labor is opposed to me as alien. It's not like seeing something red. It's especially when we speak about the formal subsumption, where there are no visible changes in the process of labor itself. Of course, it is rooted in some form of sensory experience, but it's a sort of continuous experience that probably already engages some kind of conceptual framing of it. Then is it explicit belief? It may be. But is it necessary for the worker to think, whoa, my labor is so opposed to me today, for the subsumption to take place? I don't think so. I can even think that, especially in with development of different managerial ideologies of the last years, it's very easy to see where the situation where worker has explicitly beliefs that are contrary to this confrontation. My labor is my passion. That still may be somehow, again, subsumed even further under the workings of capitalistic exploitation. So maybe it's a kind of immersion of space of reasons. Let's find out. Yes, it is. How to think of it? It's a different question, to which I will try to reach at the end. But now let's consider the practical or even empirical act, in a sense, in this confrontation. In which sense it's an act? In two senses, at least. In one, it's the act of being confronted by labor. So it's an act that passively affects the worker, where labor is a strange kind of objectified subject affecting us. And secondly, it's an act on the side of the worker who does this or that stuff during the process of the labor for this or that reasons. So for sure, at some point, it becomes compulsive. But does the specific subsumption of labor under capital consist in this compulsion? I wouldn't say so, because then it would be a purely physicalist reaction. It would be a natural process that just happens when a person is placed in a factory. Secondly, is it a prudential calculation that is executed in this act? I think it may be involved. Usually it is to some degree. But is the prudential calculation mystification that is present in this process. I'm not so sure. That's why I'm inclined to think of this act as something that is an execution of a practical norm that has been imposed and probably implicitly justified in a certain certain environment of working conditions. So I don't have the full answer how to, in more formal and analytical terms, express this conception of subsumption as a material locus in space of reason. But here are some aspects of it that I think should be included. First, it is implicit in a way that it is embodied. We don't have to have a conscious grasp of the rules of working of capitalism in order to execute those rules in our conduct. Moreover, we can think we are following different rules than we are actually following in this engagement with the labor process. And secondly, it's emergent and effective. So first of all, it has to be assumed in the labor process in the strange way. I think this is where we're supposed to speak of dialectics, in a strange way where it is also already assumed by this very process. And it can also be validated sort of empirically. We have a purely instrumental set of rules of conduct, and some of them turn out to be effective. And this validates them as right rules of conduct, without mention of the whole social arrangement that made them effective in the first place. And then the very subsumption is effective in the sense that it has kind of a looping effect, in which the formal subsumption of labor transforms to a real subsumption of labor. So this normative dimension literally shapes the productive process. And the third thing is that is potentially mystified, so that the things present themselves not necessarily as they could present themselves, but not in a way that it's an illusion, in a way that the process itself requires them to present themselves like that to work. And I wanted to add something to it. And for this very reason, we can have also sort of split in our discursive bindings, in a way that we can be in position where two different agents engaging in a discursive interaction operate under conflicting norms and assumptions and presuppositions, but the very positioning of those agent speakers disallows them to find this ground on which the conflict on this base level could be made explicit and worked out. So this is it. Could you Thank you. So here are some conclusions from this talk. First of all, I think it's not the best idea to think of Marx as a mere genealogist. I don't think he'd be philosophically very interesting that way. And I think there is evidence that that he in fact wasn't a mere genealogist. Secondly, we can probably have a idea in mind when thinking about the relation between reasons and the matter, in which a similar relation between to that between labor and capital occurs. So that and probably also subsumption of labor under capital is a specific case of this relation, where what is material, what is merely operational, begins to be reasonable and normative, and that this is the only way for this operational level to be ever intelligible to us. If we'd like to have a notion of ideology in our theory, I think this kind of thinking could lead us more towards expressivist rather than representationalist notion of ideology, but I won't talk too much about it. And also building in pretty strong version of normativity, strong conception of normativity within the material productive processes can lead to a conflict rather than a consensual theory of normativity, which probably could be better at solving cases where we have some systematic misunderstandings, ideological workings at play, than a consensual theory of normativity to which we have to add some conflict from the outside. This is it. Thank you very much.
Might be a really basic question, because you began with, or you kind of got to quite early on, I think, an articulation of like the difference between the labourer, the active labour and the boss, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, we have this like gesture to Brandom in the space of reasons, and you referred to that. And I guess what I'm wondering about is just a very simple question, which is like how you conceive of like the dynamic structure of the political in this instance, because on the one hand, there's like an implication of like class struggle that structures the possibilities for change. And then on the other hand, there's this idea of this assumption of all these conditions under the rational, which would perhaps make us see things, the class struggle as being an impossibility or being unviable now, in the sense that we could say things like both the boss and the worker are differently organised under capital, and neither of them master it, or, you know, like we can talk about both being subsumed in the domain of capitalism. And I kind of wonder, like, just how you're thinking about the viability of even talking about things like class struggle today, given that the space of reason seems to deny that possibility in the way you're framing it. So it's maybe not so relevant, but
No, it is.
You didn't mention class struggle, and you kind of implied it but didn't mention it, so I just wondered what you thought.
Yeah, I didn't mention class struggle because then I would have to go to the notion of interest, which I find very hard to grasp. But I think it's present, and one thing I actually forget to mention explicitly. I think this reading of Marx is rationalist in a sense that instead of unmasking reasons as something driven by interest, it can unmask good reasons as bad reasons driven by interest. And when it comes to class struggle, I sympathize with the conception where our reasons depend on positions in society, also class positions. And but then I also think it is important to distinguish between case where someone provides a bad reason in conduct or bad justification because they occupy certain position in class society, from the case where someone provides bad justification and we know why when we look at their class position in class society. So I think I don't think we can get rid of class struggle in the view of political structures today, and but what I'm most interested in is in how our class position regulates our access to different conceptual reasons, conceptual tools such as meanings, reasons, and so on. So again, I think it has to be seen in some kind of a dialectical relation, which I'm not sure how to define. Sorry.
So just very quickly, I don't know if I've understood that last part correctly, but it sounded like you were saying that class isn't actualized as a space of recognition that is collective in the actual site of politics, but it's more of a vector, like an index or a symbol, which we used individually to associate with. So it becomes an image as opposed to an act and like a commitment.
I don't know if I'm able to answer to that on such a short notice.
Maybe later.
Okay, thank you.